We were thinking like a few months ahead of time, whereas we needed to be thinking like 6 months, a year or plus. What's for next year? And then you'd have to be providing them new ideas, with new concepts, with new artwork. That for us was just like totally rocked the boat because we just were not prepared for the turnover that was required within the retail space. Because we got in and we were like high-fiving each other and we're like, yes, we did it. We're in retail and we're like, nationwide and all this stuff. And all of that was great. A few weeks later, they were like, so what do you have for us next year? And we're like, oh my gosh.
You're listening to Customer Growth Sessions, presented by Intergrowth, where we talk through strategies to help up-and-coming e-commerce businesses bring in more customers. I'm your host, Pat Ahern. Let's jump in.
All right, listeners, welcome back to the latest episode of Customer Growth Sessions. Today, I'm thrilled to have on Mason Duling, the Managing Director over at Almost Manic. Mason is a serial entrepreneur. We're going to get into a couple of the different businesses he's worked on. He's currently spending his time on Almost Manic, which is a performance and streetwear brand that focuses on the benefits of physical fitness and mental health and how they're correlated. Mason, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course, we're psyched to have you on today. We're going to do a deep dive on Almost Manic in episode 2 that we're going to record together here in a couple of months. Today, a lot of the focus is going to be on the first business that you co-founded, TruColour Products. Can you start out giving us an overview? How did you get started with TruColour?
So I guess the best place to start is I studied graphic design and also played soccer and lacrosse at Wheaton College. And while I was there and my time playing lacrosse, we had a ball boy and his dad ended up hanging out a lot. And his dad was a serial entrepreneur and I got to meet him and was talking with him about some stuff. And he has 4 adopted kids. And at one point, his son got injured in the driveway just playing and came inside and he had like any dad put a bandage on his son's forehead and realized that like this bandage like does not match at all. And so he started doing some research and ended up like at the end of the day deciding to see if he could start a business himself. And so he came to me originally, and I was kind of like his first call to be like, hey, what do you think of this idea? Should we like, would you be willing to create some like design and branding and content and logos and everything for it? And at the time I was just a, junior, senior in college. I was like, yeah, whatever I can do to like build my resume, And so over the next few months, like I spent time with him kind of concepting what this company would look like. And then eventually he would ask me to like come on board and be like his co-founder on the project. And so this is kind of just as I was exiting college. And so we started TruColour Products, and with the goal of providing adhesive bandages for people with different skin tones. So at the time, there was really nothing on the market to provide that would like help blend in with people's skin. And so if you had any darker complexion than something like me, you are definitely going to be struggling to find an option that would help like minimize your injury. So we started and grew it for a number of years, and now so that's how things really got started. And I really started in the design space for the company.
I love it. And so TruColour started out, or memory serves, you got really heavily involved right around, I think it was 2014, correct?
Yeah. So 2014 is late 2013, early 2014 is when the company like really launched. And then, we saw some the first few years were really challenging. We like did not get the traction we thought we were going to get. And we were just like, building the e-com and building the community and doing kind of all of the grassroots work that takes a lot of grind. And at the time, everybody was working that was involved in the business at the time was working other jobs. So it was kind of like, we'd come home from work and start plugging away on a few hours of TruColour every night and trying to just get some traction and get things moving. And that was for like the next kind of 4 or 5 years was that kind of work, and really was in a lot of ways strictly a passion project. We were getting some interest and getting some traction, and we got to do some stuff like we were recognized in Oprah's magazine at one point and different things like that. But it was the first few years were a real challenge and took some time, I think, for society to catch up with the vision and idea that we really we're trying to achieve.
Right around 2017, 2018, you guys hit a really big inflection point. Can you share a little more? What happened? What changed?
Yeah. So at 2017, 2018, we were all getting to that point where we're like, is this like going to happen? Is this going to take off? Like, is this going to be the thing? And we were having like those real serious conversations of like, should we shut this down? Is this worth continuing? Is this going to ever take off? And about that time, we got reached out, like a large box retailer reached out to us and started to have conversations with us. And like, of course, like our ears perked up. We're like, all right, how do we like make this work? And so a lot of 18 and a good portion of 19 were dedicated to the onboarding process and getting everything going with this big box retailer.
And that's amazing. So I take it all sunshine and rainbows as soon as you get into this big box retailer.
Yeah. I mean, I think we felt incredibly blessed throughout the entire process with the retailer we worked with. They gave us a second chance in a lot of ways. And so we had so much admiration. And I will say that like we had advocates inside the big box retailer that helped us immensely. Like I mean, when I say we were small, we were so small at this time. And so like learning all of the systems and implementations and everything. And our kind of advocate inside was so pumped up about us that like he was able to like introduce us to other businesses that had done it before and had the skill set and the knowledge and some of the systems, so that we ended up working really closely with some other like wound care companies at the time like to help us get our like, feet on solid ground, because it was like a total whirlwind when we first started. I mean, the amount of like acronyms alone was like making our heads spin. So getting us to figure out like what EDI was, how to facilitate a 3PL, like all of those pieces that like are pretty common knowledge, just was out of our wheelhouse at the time, but like made us really grow up really, really fast. But the advocate inside, like at the time, just made it even possible. So in a lot of different ways, from the fees that are normally associated with getting into a big box retailer and the shelf fees and all that kind of stuff, they were able to really support us to make it get financially feasible, but also like, yeah, as I said, introduce us to some of those companies that could help like guide us through that process, which was initially a challenge, and I think is always a top of mind for a lot of small businesses that are in the retail space.
I mean, it sounds like you had an incredible team of people that you were working with there. And for context listeners, today we're going to dive into not so much this one individual big box retailer, but more so a lot of, I think, the hidden challenges that come into play with getting into any big box retailer. And that's, we've had guests on the podcast who talked about this before. Kyle Berner from Feel Goods. Check out that episode. I believe it was season 1. He talks a little about getting into Whole Foods and staying in there. But today, let's talk about your experience with big box retailers. Let's start out with some of the maybe unexpected new responsibilities that you found on your plate. So you get into your big box retailer, as you said, you had some great advocates that were really pushing on your behalf. What were some of these additional to-dos that you found yourself doing on a recurring basis to maintain that relationship?
Yeah, so as I said, like the system that we were working in with was not always the standard for a lot of companies. The standard is like you either approach a big box retailer or they approach you and you pitch your products and they like your products, and then you go through this whole process of onboarding and filling out sheets and getting in the door and paying the fees that are required to get on the shelf, and then making sure that your like logistics are good and all of that. That's like the standard. For us, it was very a little bit different because of our size and at the time our cash flow. We were in a position where we had the inventory that we could facilitate and we could work with the big box retailer to provide a product that they wanted. But from like specifically the EDI side of things, with like, all the documents that need to be sent back and forth and how that worked and the cost associated with getting those parts onboarded, we ended up working with this company and becoming a SKU of this other company. And then they were like working on our behalf to sell our products. And like, it's an interesting dynamic because it was we were working with them, and it was kind of like we were one organization for this big box retailer. But then, and so we like shared some of the pitching to the executives that we would work with on our new product line. But I think the thing that we really were not prepared for was the way that we had to be ready with the next thing when we were launching the thing that we were like excited about. So it was like we were thinking like a few months ahead of time, whereas we needed to be thinking like 6 months, a year or plus for we're launching this product now, but in a few months they're going to say, hey, what's new? What's for next year? And then you'd have to be providing them new ideas with new concepts, with new artwork. And like that for us was just like totally rocked the boat because we just were not prepared for the turnover that was required within the retail space. Cause we got in and we're like high-fiving each other and we're like, yes, we did it. We're in retail and we're like, nationwide and all this stuff. And all of that was great. But it was just like a few weeks later, they were like, so what do you have for us next year? And we're like, oh my gosh, like, how are we even we just got done this big push. Now we're on to the next thing. And so I think that was a huge like learning curve for the retail market. You'll see new brands when you see a new brand in it. If they're doing it successfully, you'll come back in 6 months or a year and they'll have twice as many products and they'll like continue to grow the line. That's what they want because they want people to get into the ecosystem and then keep buying those items that like the ancillary items aside of what the primary item is. And we just were not prepared to we were like, here's our product. We're good at selling it. This is the product we want to go with. And they were like, that's not really how it works. You need new things with new that like entice people to buy. So that's something that we were just totally not prepared for. But I think that we like slowly evolved and like worked with the big box retailers team to kind of evolve some of our product line to better fit for the retail market.
So if I'm understanding correctly, it sounds like it's not the type of thing where you get into a big box retailer, you have one exceptional product and you just run with that product for the next decade. It sounds like that product needs to be evolving, at least in small manners, every 6-12 months.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there are definitely the exceptions to the rule. Like, I think a good example is a company like you'll see it in chapsticks. It's just like a funny one, but with chapsticks, you'll see like their standard chapstick, but then they're like coming out with variations of flavors or variations of like some are in a tube, some are in like a twist style. So they just want variation because they know every customer coming in is going to want something slightly differently. So like they're still producing the same product, but like a good example is Carmex. Like they have the twist one, but then they also have the squeeze tube. And then they've got ones with SPF and ones without SPF. Like those are the types of things that I'm talking about where it's like they're deviating from their primary product, but it's all within the line. And so I think that was something that we started out our product lines in bags because we felt like bags for bandages, like I don't know why it's not more widespread, but like that was one of our big selling points beyond the skin tone aspect was that like how many times have you put a box of bandages in your gym bag and they get crushed and all of a sudden like there's bandages all over your gym bag. This was like a resealable bag. It was easy. It fit in like a purse, a back pocket, a gym bag, like wherever you wanted it. But like from a retail perspective, it was a little bit of a nightmare, right? Because it's fitting primarily on the shelf. And then when it's fitting on the shelf, it needs to be in a PDQ. And so like you're tearing that PDQ open and then you're hoping that the bandage bags stand up correctly. So like when we started that. We started with bags in like PDQs on like cardboard boxes on the shelf. And that worked relatively well. But then by the end of our time working with some of these retailers, we were in boxes because it was just easier for everybody. It went onto the shelf in a more simple capacity and it just worked better. But it was something that we had to like really process because it was like, this is one of our big selling points. And if we're not like doing what we were originally setting out to do, like what are we willing to give up to continue this process? And packaging ended up being one of those things because we were staying true to the product that we were providing, but we were just changing how the platform. But like we kept with bags on e-com and in a lot of different places long term, but retail when it was like when everything is shelf driven, it was just a necessity to pivot to doing boxes.
Hey listeners, if you're terrified about what AI means for how customers are going to find you online, I have some good news for you. SEO, meta ads, Google ads, these platforms are still going to drive the lion's share of your new customers over the next 5 years. But these platforms are evolving. At Intergrowth, we help e-commerce brands to future-proof their revenue and to scale more profitably through SEO and meta ads. If you're interested in learning more, book a free strategy session with our team at intergrowth.com/CGS. Once again, that's intergrowth.com/CGS. Man, interesting. So I want to step back, and there was an acronym you threw out there. I might botch this one, so bear with me if I do. I think it was EOQ, electronic order, but I'm
EDI,
blanking on the.
electronic data
Yeah,
interface. Yeah.
yeah. Talk to me a little about that. So how did that come into play? What did you have to do there?
Yeah, so EDI is really popular in retail and in a number of different capacities. But the concept is that, like, let's take the big box retailer that we were working with. They have a structure for all of their documentation. It looks a certain way, it acts a certain way, but when they send that document to let's say TruColor, we as TruColor would not have been able to read that document the way that they had presented it, and we would have been confused, and it would have taken us time to learn their documents and how their documents are set up and what all the verbiage and everything. What EDI does is sits like right in the middle. So when big box retailer sends a document, it gets recoded and then sent to TruColor or the other company on the other end, and it looks like the way that company interacts with documents. So you work with different companies. There's like SPS Commerce is one that kind of is like this middleman to help facilitate all this document transfer. And it can be everything from like purchase orders to shipping receipts to all different things. And there's and it's a whole code of different document coding. And like, they'll be like, do you mean this document? And they'll just give you a string of numbers and you're like, I don't know, maybe. What is that? And so like, you just start learning, and like you pay by the document, which is also really interesting for a lot of these platforms. And you have to work with the big box retailers, like IT department, and you have to have a system that facilitates it. And then they like all talk to each other, and inherently all EDI tends to work when you're using an ERP, which is like a good example of an ERP is like NetSuite. Like it's primarily just manages your inventory, but it does a lot of other things as well. And one of those things is facilitate EDI documents coming in and out. So you have like this middleman, which handles all the EDI documents. You have your ERP, which handles all your inventory and other adjustments and sales and shipping and everything, and keeps track of everything on your end. And then the big box store has their own system. So like the big name is NetSuite, but like there's a number of different ones. EDI can be incredibly complicated at the start. And so when we first went into retail, we were actually working with this other company to help facilitate some of our EDI requests, because it was a requirement by the big box store that we use EDI in order to like facilitate all the ordering that they were going to be doing. That was a huge learning curve. Once you can get your head around it, it's not overly complicated, but at the beginning, it feels like I have no idea how I'm going to learn all of this by the end.
I was going to say half of all listeners are forever scared away from ever trying to work with a big box retail. No, just kidding.
No, I think
listeners, it's not that bad. It's doable.
Yeah,
you can
no,
handle
it's
it.
not. No, it's not. You also have to understand that like at TruColor, we were coming from different backgrounds. Like I did not study business. I did not do any of that. Like I had a creative mind and I can solve really big problems. Like that's my go-to. And that's why I ended up in the position that I was in at TruColor in the long term. In reality, like we were so small that we were like, EDI what? ERP what? Like, I don't know any of this stuff. And to a company that's maybe a little bit more solidified, some of those moves would have been significantly easier, but it was just because we were so small that it was the hurdle that it was. So in no way all of these platforms, by the way, are a benefit. When you get properly set up and everything implemented correctly, everything is like practically automated by the end. Like the purchase order from the big box store, it comes into like the EDI platform that you're using, gets kicked out to your ERP, that gets sent to your 3PL, and then that's like, it's done. Like it gets shipped. Like it's that easy. And oftentimes it's automated. So the only thing that you may be doing is going like, accept and because you have the inventory. Like, it can become that easy, but going from zero to getting that system set up can be very complicated. And it's like we had multiple 3PLs at one point. So it was like working with each 3PL to get all of them integrated into working with working with the EDI software that we were using. And so just like it took a little bit of like coordination to make it really work smoothly, and took us a while, to probably longer than it should have, but a while to get that set up properly.
Hey, listeners, Pat from Intergrowth here. Field of Dreams was an exceptional movie, but man, did those guys get it wrong. If you build it, they will not come. We've been helping e-commerce brands since 2016 to acquire new customers more profitably. So after that website that you built goes live and when no one's coming in the door, we help you to get to the next stage. Interested in learning a little more? Go to intergrowth.com/CGS to schedule a complimentary consultation call with me and get to learn all about how we help businesses to level up. Once again, that's intergrowth.com/CGS. And I think for listeners, what I would imagine can be overwhelming if they're still in an early stage, but they're looking to get in that first big box retailer. What I'm hearing is you guys got into this scenario where there were a lot of these unknown unknowns. There were a lot of like things that you didn't know that you didn't even know. And I'm curious, since that time, have you found any resources in particular that you really wish you could have given to like 2017, 2018 yourself that would have been really helpful for better understanding, let's say, some of these concepts at a very high level, but also maybe how to start the process of starting to integrate some of these systems?
That's a great question. I think I probably would have started, like, this sounds funny and kind of indirect, but I probably would have started my business book reading evolution earlier. Books that most people have read, but like Good to Great's a good example. Like some of these books that are like foundationally strong and help you just set up a well functioning business from the ground. It gives you a different mindset to how things should function and run. But when it comes to getting connected with retailers in general, TruColor was particularly blessed because of the product that we were selling, where we would have a lot of interest from parties finding us. And then we would get to work with them because they were like, hey, we like what you're doing. We want to work with you. And we had worked really hard early on the branding and the image of the company. So we tended to play significantly above our pay grade a lot of the time because of the branding that we had done early on. But I think there are companies and that will help you navigate some of those intricacies of retail. They will basically be an advocate on your behalf. A lot of the time, like, these organizations kind of like trade employees a lot of the time with the big box retailers. And so you kind of have this like inside track to getting in. It helps if you already have the interest of some of these companies. You can say, well, we've got interest from so and so, but we need kind of help walking through the whole process. Like, these companies can help do that. I wish I had one like off the top of my head, but I don't. But it's like they work very closely with these big box retailers, and you can use them as support. So and they can walk you through some of those pieces that get more complicated, especially because it's not just like when you're onboarding, but it's also like once you're in, some of those dynamics can be very challenging to figure out, like, how do I pitch this correctly? How do I like approach the person who's buying? And it's interesting because you can have buyers in big box that like feel more emotional when it comes to products. They're like, I love this product. I want this product to be in. Let's figure out how to make this product successful. And then you have buyers that are like, this is failing numbers wise, so we should cut it, or this is competing with this, so we should cut it. Like, and they just are like very analytical with the way that they choose to do their buying and their management of their products. So it really is a little bit of a toss up who you get, but it's just like playing to those particular strengths and working with them as closely as possible to make it successful. So,
Wow. And for some of these firms that will almost help you to navigate these waters, what would be like a good term for this type of firm that maybe I can Google so that I can find, a couple of different providers to look into?
man, I think it would be like, it's almost like like almost seems like a retail manager. I don't exactly know, like, because as I said, like the way that we actually got connected with the one that we ended up working with was the company that we were partnered with kind of to get to work with this big box retailer. They ended up getting connected with them. So like it was almost like we didn't have a whole lot of control over that and they just started working with them. So I wish I had a better answer for that, but it's, yeah, I would call it like a almost like a retail manager, or like I think if you probably Googled like maybe retail onboarding support, you'd probably find somebody that if you just search that on Google, you might be able to find either a group or a individual that would be able to help kind of navigate some of that stuff. So, but they were basically like a consultant in a lot of ways.
Brilliant. So when you and I were chatting before this, one of the things that really stood out to me is what I would refer to as the concept of marketing within the big box retailers, individual stores. Can you talk a little about that?
Yeah. So I think I want to start out by saying that every big box retailer is different and their expectations and desires are different. And so there are some that have more flexibility than others. We had dealt with some of the retailers that we worked with. It was very easy to like promote and send, posts on social media and tell people that we were in such and such retailer. Others were a little bit more strict and would like, say, hey, take that post down, don't mention us, whatever it might be. The way that they primarily like to work is they primarily like to utilize their own marketing department to support your growth. So you will go to them and you say, hey, I'd really love to be on an end cap for this month. And what does that look like? And they normally give you some level of a figure of what that costs. And then you can basically what you're doing is investing in the placement of your product or investing in particular signage or investing in particular packages within that retailer, and then they will help promote it. And what that does is in a lot of ways it simplifies it, because then you're not battling with any of their legal team going, don't say our name, don't post our logo, don't do whatever. They're able to just do it all right away because they already have the permission, they already have the control there, and you're investing the money. So it depends. As I said, every retailer tends to be slightly different. That's why some of the onboarding can be complicated, because you're like, well, this is how it was here, but it's different here. But I think for the marketing side of things, it tends to be that they like to play in-house. And if you try to do it outside of house, it can be very complicated. That's where some of these like, consultants can help with navigating some of that. But I wouldn't call it strikes, but like we had moments where they would ask us to say like, hey, don't post that. Like you need, or what they would really ask is that we would send all of our content that we had developed to their legal team, and their legal team would decide what was appropriate and what wasn't. And then we could then post what gets approved. So it just like extends the timeline for what you're able to do. Yeah.
Fascinating. Yeah, it sounds like lead times are a little bit longer for any sort of marketing activity you want to put out.
Yeah, if you're choosing to do it yourself, that's one of the benefits of working directly with them, is that they will expedite some of that stuff. And they're already running the system so they can implement in the best way that they see fit, and that can be really really beneficial in the long term. So
Wow. So in hindsight, when you were selling in big box retailers, did you find that there was a series of almost metrics that you needed to most closely monitor to make sure really you just stayed in good favor with these different retailers?
yeah, I think they really will. Most of them will assign you an expected amount of sales per store per month or per week. And you just have to do your very best to hit those numbers, because anything below that, they will start to question you. The interesting thing about us was that we were doing well enough, but we weren't like, but sometimes we were competing with some really big competitors in the space. Because it was a variation of a product that had been around for a long time, there was really no data saying, oh, it's going to perform this way. They were just taking the data from the items that had been around for a really long time and said, oh, well, it should perform this way because everything else tends to perform this way. So, I mean, primary goal is sell. Like if there's anything that you can do, it is get the word out and get selling product as much as possible. And It really, like, it depends on the type of product. Like, sometimes it can be as little as, like, a quarter of product a week, or it can be, like, sometimes it'll be more like, 4, 5, 6 units a week or more. It really depends on the portion of the industry that you're in and where you're selling, and what part of the story you're in. They they get very data driven when it comes to, like, where things are located, how they're presented, what shelf they're on, and not just like in what section. Like, we were in the bandage aisle, but it's like, are you on the top shelf? Are you on the bottom shelf? And like, because when you're as a customer, you walk in, where are you looking? You're looking at either eye level or like midway up. And like, what does that like shelf look like? And so it was like, how do you perform well enough that you're not overly competing with other competitors that's going to make them upset, but how do you get on the right shelf so that people are interested in buying you and your product? So it really is, everything is a number in retail, and it's a constant game to try to get yourself in the right place at the right time so that buyers get excited.
Jason, this has been amazing. The last big question I want to ask you is, let's say you can hop in your time machine, you can go back to 2017, 2018, you get to talk to yourself. Are there one or two tidbits of advice you'd give to yourself before starting the experience of getting into big box retailers?
Yeah, I think just generally learning about the system of business from, like, because we had an understanding of what it took within e-commerce and what that required, and ad spend and all of those pieces. But the thing that we didn't, because we were going along and then all of a sudden someone would approach us and we would react. Like, I think being slightly more prepared and understand some of those concepts and how the system worked ahead of time, instead of like learning on the fly, could have been invaluable from a time perspective of just like how long it would take us to get onboarded, how and whether it made sense to work with other small companies or whether we would try to figure out how to do it on our own. And some of those pieces that I think could have benefited us, but also like it feels a little bit risky because the way that we did it, we played it as effectively as we could at the time, but it could have been an opportunity for us to go, we're going to do it ourselves and figure out how to do it ourselves and maybe take a bigger risk. But with that risk, would have provided us probably a little bit more control in the scenario. And so think that going back, I would have been like, probably just like believe in the product and believe in yourself and like invest in what you're doing. I think that's probably as simple as that is. Sometimes it's easy when the scale gets huge on what you're doing or what you're trying to do gets bigger and bigger. You start getting a little bit nervous because you're like, man, this is the negative outcome to this. If it goes south is huge. So it starts to feel a little bit more daunting. But I think probably going back, just going like, you guys got this. Like, just do it yourselves, make it happen. I think all that being said, though, I can't stress enough how the way that we did it worked at the moment that we needed it to and provided us a platform to be successful long term in and outside of retail. I mean, we started getting calls from people going, "Hey, I think I saw you in, this big box retailer." And you go, "Oh, okay, great. Like, how can we help you?" Like, it's opened the door immensely on the retail side. And like, much as it can be challenging and have its like intricacies, there's no doubt that it is a massive benefit to the business if you can get in retail and make it sustainable. It just like keeps going. And I think that's, especially with the big boxes, so many products in one place, and to be able to like stand up and be a product that is successful in that space is amazing by itself. But getting selected out of all the other products that want to be on the shelf is something to be satisfied with. But just knowing that like getting in is where the work starts, not where the work, ends and you can celebrate. It's exciting to get in, but it makes it all the more important to work harder and support your product the best you can and work well with the retailer.
I love it. So Mason, obviously you exited the business. You're working on Almost Manic now. Can you give us a little bit more of a sneak peek about what you're doing with Almost Manic, and then also talk to us just maybe briefly, give us a little snippet of what are you doing with the docu-series right now? We'll dive deeper, obviously, in the next episode, but give us a little sneak peek.
Yeah. So for the past few years, I've had this idea of doing something surrounding mental health. I've had my own mental health, and then also people that I'm close to who have had challenges with mental health. Like, I just felt a calling to be a part of making a difference. Back from my design days, I have loved designing graphic tees and making clothing. And so that's something that I really wanted to figure out how to incorporate into a career potentially. And so I started this concept of Almost Manic, which kind of riffs off of like the it's off of bipolar. And so I started coming up with this concept and started over the last few years. And then finally this past year in 2025, at the beginning of it, I kind of launched the business, and it's still relatively small. And we're just like selling t-shirts right now, but and hoodies. The goal is to expand the lines, make a few more performance items. And then we're kind of an aside, we're doing a 6-part docuseries about a 200-mile gravel race in Kansas called Unbound. It happens every year. It's kind of like the Super Bowl of gravel racing for biking. And I myself and then 3 other guys that are going to be on the team are going to be racing it at the end of May. And we're going to be documenting the experience and how a general age grouper that is nowhere near pro, what their experience is, how the training is beneficial to mental health, but also how it can be challenging to fit something this big in a schedule full of work and family and kids and everything. So we're kind of in the early stages. We're partnering with a number of different companies to help make it a reality, which we're really excited about. And over the next few months from now till May, we'll be kind of documenting on social media. So you can follow along on Almost Manic and their social media platforms. And then also like we'll be doing kind of more polished 6 episodes that will kind of share more kind of stories about the guys that are racing and kind of their impact and how mental health has impacted them. And then also like a final episode about the race and kind of a recap. So we're excited about that, but it's been a lot of work so far, but we're excited about the future and then the conclusion of it. So it's going to be a fun next couple of months.
Amazing. Once again, listeners, this is Mason Duling, serial entrepreneur and managing director of Almost Manic. Mason, thank you for coming on today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to Customer Growth Sessions. If you found it helpful, subscribe and give us a review. It helps us to grow the show. Looking for more SEO guidance on how to grow your business? Contact us at intergrowth.com/estimator or email me directly. You can reach me at pat@intergrowth.com. That's all for today. We'll see you again soon.